Okay, so for these prompts for this first video, reflecting on what I might have originally believed about the concept of an addictive personality, I think I would say the concept of a addictive personality never, for me, I think centered on a personality type. I think just, knowing that personality is constructed by a lot of different factors, beliefs, values, genetics, environment, behaviors, right? But I, see how in our culture we talk about personality as it's fixed, and it's not. So, generally I've thought of it as a whole person disease that is hard to break and has the potential to take everything from somebody. And it really requires a lot of support for maintaining sobriety or long-term healing. Moving on to the next prompt, understanding, since reviewing the module materials, I think my understanding has shifted a bit to better understand, the role of motivation and pleasure, and relates to dopamine adaptations, how cravings, impulsivity grow, making daily habits hard to keep up with. It affects executive functioning, the prefrontal cortex, which regulates self-control and is critical for functioning well day to day. Understanding the message, don't label clients. Personality traits factor in, but genetics make up more than 50% of that. So, environmental stress, systemic factors as well. Addiction is an adaptation, understanding that people have ways to cope, which can be harmful or deadly, and how important holistic treatment is to building, healthy coping long term. And, understanding and practice for counselors and counseling, how important the role of empathy is, being able to see clients beyond the stigma or label, recognizing aspects, within the biopsychosocial lens around trauma, neurobiology, ensuring dignity and respect are at the center of client care and treatment is so important, as well as, having a multi-treatment response, that integrates care. So that is like the whole person treatment, which sounds great, but it's challenging to do. And therefore, relapse happens, withdrawal can be brutal, and the cycle continues until, people can really get that integrated care that they really need. The next prompt, moving on to, how pop science and pop culture contribute to bias or stigma, and how that affects treatment and counseling. So, something I was thinking about is how important it is to dismantle bias caused by myths around recovery that's messier than we often see in pop culture. So as counselor advocates, it's important to fight stigma and not view addiction as like a personal moral failing. It's not, poor character. And when we challenge this myth, we can improve client care and support that whole person healing. Culture and media perpetuate stigma and can push these dangerous stereotypes, that create very one-dimensional characters, like that are often seen as reckless, impulsive, or violent. They experience a quick change that doesn't really show the realities of recovery or relapse, right? And how hard that is. As well as in different family systems or cultures, addiction may be seen as a sin or a moral failing. It often can remain hidden or unspoken, and, is maintained in those silence or in isolation in families. So it's really important to understand the complexity that drives addiction and keeps people stuck in a cycle without lasting change. And then the next prompt, in thinking about why it matters for counselors, if we hold on to these myths around addictive personality, how that can harm and misguide clients in session. I think looking at that through the biopsychosocial lens and maintaining that myth can harm in different ways, like mischaracterizing, what we talked about in the brain, the altered reward, motivation, and stress pathways, as these like fixed personality traits rather than, seeing them as deeply learned adaptations in the brain and psychologically. We know it can pathologize clients' self-identity instead of recognizing it, the compulsive use of it as a learned coping mechanism that helps, manage chronic issues, health, distress, trauma, or unmet emotional needs. It isolates a person from their surroundings, their community, their family. It ignores the external drivers around it, around social ties and fractures there in families, systemic oppression, and the isolation that comes, I think can directly keep them stuck in that pattern.